Good morning, or evening, afternoon. Welcome to Think and Grow New Rich. This is an online study group designed to help everyone who takes part unprogram from scarcity and lack consciousness by reading from an amazing magic book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, but also with a bit of the philosophy of Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Work Week in the New Rich, where you actually have a life as well as wealth, where you're not just slaving your guts out and then you fall over and die the minute you're wealthy. So hi Geraldine.
Hi Sandy.
Oh, you're outside. I love it.
Sun.
Yay. Oh, it's beautiful where you are. Where in Ireland is it?
It's Kerry. It's on the west coast of Ireland.
Oh, okay.
West Coast. It's beautiful there.
Hi, we have Glenn in Nashville.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Geraldine. It's beautiful back there. See that?
Yeah, the mountains. I love it. How high up are you, Geraldine?
Well, we're a mile from the road. To drive up is a mile.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how high.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what altitude is? So not that high altitude then?
No, not really.
Oh. For a second it looked like you were at the top of the Alps or something, because there's so many mountains in the background. You could have said 1,000 feet. I'd have been like, oh yeah. So we're on chapter 11 now, aren't we? Or the one about the mystery of sex transmutation. So
Yes.
we just got up to page 163. Genius is developed through the sixth sense. Yay! Would anybody like to read?
Well, why don't you read today, Sandy? That would be nice.
Yeah, sure, I can. That's fine. So I will share my screen. So basically, yesterday we read about how we finished chapter 10, which was all about masterminds and like the stream of wealth. When you tune into that, it just starts to come like a river down a hill. And then we talked about the importance of like a partner, of like sexual energy in having a different vibration, really, is what he's saying, which is quite funny, really, for a guy. You associate this book more with business and stuff, and then so I like it. Okay, so here we are. Can you see? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So genius is developed through the sixth sense. The reality of a sixth sense has been fairly well established. This sixth sense is creative imagination. The faculty of creative imagination is one which the majority of people never use during an entire lifetime. Oh, and I think, Glenn, are you able to mute yourself? There's a bit of noise coming from your mic.
I have my earphones on.
It's just if you scroll to the top, there's like where I'm sort of showing the cursor. There's some buttons, and you can mute your microphone. Because I can just hear it a lot.
I'll do that. Okay.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so the faculty of creative imagination is one which the majority of people never use during an entire lifetime, and if used at all, it usually happens by mere accident. A relatively small number of people use, with deliberation and purpose, a forethought, the faculty of creative imagination. Those who use this faculty voluntarily and with understanding of its functions are genii. The faculty of creative imagination is the direct link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. All so-called revelations referred to in the realm of religion and all discoveries of basic or new principles in the field of invention take place through the faculty of creative imagination. When ideas or concepts flash into one's mind through what is popularly called a hunch, they come from one or more of the following sources. 1. Infinite intelligence. 2. One's subconscious mind, wherein is stored every sense impression and thought impulse which ever reached the brain through any of the 5 senses. 3. From the mind of some other person who has just released the thought or the picture of the idea or concept through conscious thought. Or 4. From the other person's subconscious storehouse. There are no other known sources from which inspired ideas or hunches may be received. The creative imagination functions best when the mind is vibrating due to some form of mind stimulation and at an exceedingly high rate. That is, when the mind is functioning at a rate of vibration higher than that of ordinary normal thought. When brain action has been stimulated through one or more of the 10 mind stimulants, it has the effect of lifting the individual far above the horizon of ordinary thoughts and permits him to envision distance, scope, and quality of thoughts not available on the lower plane, such as that occupied while one is engaged in the solutions of the problems of business and professional routine. When lifted to this higher level of thought through any form of mind stimulation, an individual occupies, relatively, the same position as one who has ascended in an airplane to a height from which he may see over and beyond the horizon line which limits their vision while on the ground. Moreover, while on this higher level of thought, the individual is not hampered or bound by any of the stimuli which circumscribe and limit their vision, while wrestling with the problems of gaining the three basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter. They are in a world of thought in which the ordinary, workaday thoughts have been as effectively removed as are the hills and valleys and other limitations of physical vision when he rises in an airplane. While on this exalted plane of thought, the creative faculty of the mind is given freedom for action. The way has been cleared for the sixth sense to function. It becomes receptive to ideas which could not reach the individual under any other circumstances. The sixth sense is the faculty which marks the difference between a genius and an ordinary individual. The creative faculty becomes more alert and receptive to vibrations originating outside the individual's subconscious mind, the more this faculty is used, and the more the individual relies on it and makes demands upon it for thought impulses. This faculty can be cultivated and developed only through use. That which is known as one's conscience operates entirely through the faculty of the sixth sense. The great artists, writers, musicians, and poets became great because they acquired the habit of relying upon the still small voice which speaks from within, through the faculty of creative imagination. It is a fact well known to people who have keen imaginations that their best ideas come through so-called hunches. There is a great orator who does not attain to greatness until he closes his eyes and begins to rely entirely upon the faculty of creative imagination. When asked why he closed his eyes just before the climaxes of his oratory, he replied, "I do it because then I speak through ideas which come to me from within." One of America's most successful and best-known financiers followed the habit of closing his eyes for 2 or 3 minutes before making a decision. When asked why he did this, he replied, "With my eyes closed, I am able to draw upon a source of superior intelligence." The late Dr. Elmer R. Gates of Chevy Chase, Maryland, created more than 200 useful patents, many of them basic, through the process of cultivating and using the creative faculty. His method is both significant and interesting to one interested in attaining to the state of genius, in which category Dr. Gates unquestionably belonged. Dr. Gates was one of the really great, though less publicized scientists of the world. In his laboratory, he had what he called his personal communication room. It was practically soundproof and so arranged that all light could be shut out. It was equipped with a small table on which he kept a pad of writing paper. In front of the table, on the wall, was an electric push button which controlled the lights. When Dr. Gates desired to draw upon the forces available to him through his creative imagination, he would go into this room, seat himself at the table, shut off the lights, and concentrate upon the known factors of the invention of which he was working, remaining in that position until ideas began to flash into his mind in connection with the unknown factors of the invention. On one occasion, ideas came through so fast that he was forced to write for almost 3 hours. When the thoughts stopped flowing and he examined his notes, he found they contained a minute description of principles which had not a parallel among the known data of the scientific world. Moreover, the answer to his problem was intelligently presented in those notes. In this manner, Dr. Gates completed over 200 patents which had been begun, but not completed by half-baked brains. Evidence of the truth of this statement is in the United States Patent Office. Dr. Gates earned his living by sitting for ideas for individuals and corporations. Some of the largest corporations in America paid him substantial fees by the hour for sitting for ideas. The reasoning faculty is often faulty because it is largely guided by one's accumulated experience. Not all knowledge which one accumulates through experience is accurate. Ideas received through the creative faculty are much more reliable, for the reason that they come from sources more reliable than any which are available to the reasoning faculty of the mind. The major difference between the genius and the ordinary crank inventor may be found in the fact that the genius works through his faculty of creative imagination, while the crank knows nothing of this faculty. The scientific inventor, such as Mr. Edison and Dr. Gates, makes use of both the synthetic and the creative faculties of imagination. For example, the scientific inventor or genius begins an invention by organizing and combining the known ideas or principles accumulated through experience through the synthetic faculty, the reasoning faculty. If he finds this accumulated knowledge to be insufficient for the completion of his invention, he then draws upon the sources of knowledge available to him through his creative faculty. The method by which he does this varies with the individual, but this is the sum and substance of his procedure. Number one, they stimulate their mind so that it vibrates on a higher than average plane, using one or more of the 10 mind stimulants or some other stimulant of their choice. Those were in the earlier passage we read yesterday. 2. They concentrate upon the known factors, the finished parts of their invention, and create in their mind a perfect picture of unknown factors, the unfinished part of the invention. They hold this picture in their mind until it has been taken over by the subconscious mind, and then relaxes by clearing their mind of all thoughts and waiting for their answer to flash into their mind. Sometimes the results are both definite and immediate. At other times, the results are negative, depending upon the state of development of the sixth sense or creative faculty. Mr. Edison tried out more than 10,000 different combinations of ideas through the synthetic faculty of his imagination before he turned in through the creative faculty and got the answer which perfected the incandescent light. His experience was similar when he produced the talking machine, the dictaphone, I think. There is plenty of reliable evidence that the faculty of creative imagination exists. This evidence is available through accurate analysis of people who have become leaders in their respective callings without having had extensive educations. Lincoln was a notable example of a great leader who achieved greatness through the discovery and use of his faculty of creative imagination. He discovered and began to use his faculty as a result of the stimulation of love which he experienced after he met Anne Rutledge, a statement of the highest significance in connection with the study of the source of genius. The pages of history are filled with the records of great leaders whose achievements may be traced directly to the influence of a partner who aroused the creative faculties of their minds through the stimulation of sex desire. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of these. When inspired by his first wife Josephine, he was irresistible and invincible. When his better judgment or reasoning faculty prompted him to put Josephine aside, he began to decline. His defeat and St. Helena were not far distant. If good taste would permit, we might easily mention scores of people, well known to the American people, who climbed to great heights of achievement under the stimulating influence of their spouses, only to drop back to destruction after money and power went to their heads, and they put aside the old wife for a new one. Napoleon was not the only man to discover that sex influence from the right source is more powerful than any substitute of expediency which may be created by mere reason. The human mind responds to stimulation. Among the greatest and most powerful of these stimuli is the urge of sex. When harnessed and transmuted, this driving force is capable of lifting people into that higher sphere of thought which enables them to master the sources of worry and petty annoyance which beset their pathway on the lower plane. Unfortunately, only the genii have made the discovery. Others have accepted that the experience of sex urge without discovering one of its major potentialities, a fact which accounts for the great number of others as compared to the limited number of genii. For the purpose of refreshing the memory, in connection with the facts available from the biographies of certain men, we here present the names of a few men of outstanding achievement, each of whom was known to have been of a highly sexed nature. The genius which was theirs undoubtedly found its source of power in transmuted sex energy. George Washington, Napoleon Bonaparte, William Shakespeare, Abraham Lincoln, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Robert Burns, Thomas Jefferson, Elbert Hubbard, Albert H. Gary, Oscar Wilde, Woodrow Wilson, John H. Patterson, Andrew Jackson, Enrico Caruso. Your own knowledge of biography will enable you to add to this list. Find, if you can, a single person in all history of civilization who achieved outstanding success in any calling, who was not driven by a well-developed sex nature. I'm just going to see how much... Oh yeah, I'll just go to that end bit there. If you do not wish to rely upon biographies of men not now living, take inventory of those whom you know to be people of great achievement, and see if you can find one among them who is not highly sexed. Sex energy is the creative energy of all genii. There never has been and never will be a great leader, builder, or artist lacking in this driving force of sex. Surely no one will misunderstand these statements to mean that all who are highly sexed are genii. People who attain to the status of genius only when and if they stimulate their mind so that it draws upon the forces available through the creative faculty of the imagination. Chief among the stimuli with which this stepping up of the vibrations may be produced is sex energy. The mere possession of this energy is not sufficient to produce a genius. The energy must be transmuted from desire for physical contact into some other form of desire and action before it will lift one to the status of a genius. Far from becoming genii because of great sex desires, the majority of men lower themselves through misunderstanding and misuse of this great force to the status of the lower animals. Okay, there we go. That's a fascinating chapter. I'll just come out of the screen share.
Okay.
Actually, something I can share unless one of you guys wants to go first.
No, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. Well, I think I mentioned that I just read a book recently about the power of habit, and
Yes.
it had a really interesting passage in it about they discovered that scientists studied the brains of rats. Like they put, it's quite horrible really, but they put machines into their brains and created like these tests for rats, and they wanted to see how rats developed habits. And what they showed was that when you put a rat into a maze and you put chocolate at one end and the rat has to find the way to the chocolate, the first few times the rat did it, its brain activity was always really high because it was everything was new and it was exciting, and it was like it was having to work a lot harder because it didn't know where anything was. But then after the first sort of 10, 15 times, the rats would find their way to the chocolate on autopilot. And what would happen was the brain would spike at the beginning, get loads like really high activity, and then it would go down and like flatten out, and then just before the chocolate it would raise again. And the point of that experiment was to show that we kind of do the same thing, that when we're just sort of doing our daily routine, so much of it is habit that we don't even consciously think, and our brain literally is way less active than usual. Which is what's so interesting in this chapter, where he's saying that what happens when you're in love or when you're doing things that stimulate your mind is your activity literally goes up. But he's saying it's not completely about the mind though, because you have to connect to outer stuff. So did you guys have any? Did it remind you of anything you've come across when you heard that chapter?
Well, I suppose it reminded me a little bit, you know, in access consciousness, they talk very much about, you know, your sexualness and how it's all about receiving and not judging. So it's just like, yeah, you open yourself up and don't cut that part, don't judge that part and cut it off as something that's kind of bad or not appropriate. And in a way, I could kind of see it in that you're kind of, yeah, you're allowing that energy part of, you know, attracting in your life rather than being inappropriate or, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're not trying to think everything out. You're like open to new ideas or to the flow. It's actually how, have you guys read Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God?
No, I haven't read that.
I haven't, no.
That's a book. It's kind of like a spiritual book. It came to a guy he'd been homeless, was really struggling in his life, like had broken his neck, couldn't work, and he managed to get out into a house, like out of the streets, but he was just so low, and he wrote a letter to God saying, you know, what the hell am I supposed to do? I'm just so unhappy. Everything's going wrong. My wife has left me. My neck's broken. Like I was homeless, and then he just got this dream of like a download, as people say, you know, like so much that he wrote I think 3 books out of it and called it Conversations with God because he felt like it was just him. He was just sort of writing it out. It wasn't coming from him.
Yeah.
And that became a massive bestseller.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the woman that wrote Twilight, you know, the Twilight series, I think that started from a dream that she had. She actually dreamt that, and then she started to put it out on paper. So that's another interesting aspect too, right? Is how a dream, or how, you know, when you're in your dreaming state, of course, you don't have the filters that you would have in your waking state, right? You know, so you wonder how much of your dreaming, right, is tied into a creative imagination, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like people often have visions, and a lot of people actually write down something they want to do the next day, so that while they're sleeping, it can either come to them in their dreams or their subconscious will work on it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that is a good practice. I think that's a good practice. And recently I was reading an article called The Art of Being Mindful, and it was in a magazine, and it was about, as you were saying, you know, when you go on autopilot, right, then you're not really being mindful, right? Being mindful is trying to be present in whatever experience you're in, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's part of the creative imagination too, is that you can be more alert to be able to tap into that, you know.
Exactly.
Tap into your imagination.
Yeah, so the creative imagination, so that you're not so checked out that you can't hear what's coming in.
Yeah, what's there? Yeah.
And actually, I don't know if you guys watch Game of Thrones. Oh, it's a TV series it's based on a really popular science fiction series of books. Like they were bestsellers. And I'm a huge fan of it. I watched like 7 episodes in a day recently because I didn't know a new season had come out, and I was like, oh my god, I've missed it. But I was actually reading an interview with the author, and it was so interesting, like in relation to what we're talking about today, because he's been writing since the 70s, but he actually trained as a journalist, and then he was actually teaching, and in this interview with Vanity Fair, I'll post it in the group actually, it's such a fascinating story. He described how one of his friends at that time had actually started writing, like his name's George Martin, who I'm talking about. George wasn't yet writing that much, he was so busy with his teaching, and his friend had published 1 book, and then he just collapsed and died over his typewriter one day as he was writing. And George said in this interview that it changed his life because he realized, oh my God, I've been thinking, oh, I've got ages to write my books. You know, I'll write them in the future when I've got more time. And he said he had this moment where he realized, if I don't do something, I'm never going to write these books. And he said that teaching was taking up so much emotional energy that he tried to write at Christmas and in the summer holidays, but it just wasn't really happening. So he actually handed in his notice and decided that he was just going to pursue writing, even if he became homeless, because he knew he had these books inside him, and he wanted to publish them. And it's so inspiring because he started writing, and he got rejected 42 times for one of his stories, but he kept sending it out, and eventually he went on to write Game of Thrones, which is one of the biggest science fiction series in all history, and it's so big it couldn't even be made into a film. Like Hollywood wanted to make a Lord of the Rings type book out of it, but the books, there's 7 books in the series, and he's only written 5 of them. And so HBO ended up making like a TV series. So he's very rich now, you know, and just does what he loves, you know, writes and he's produced a bit of TV. But he said the idea for the book came to him one day as he was writing something else. A whole chapter just unfolded in his mind, and he was like, "Oh, what's that?" And so he wrote it out, and then another chapter came, and then another chapter, but they were kind of all over the place, and then he started to put it all together. But I think he's a great example of using that creative faculty that Napoleon's talking about.
Yes, I think so much of science fiction is creative imagination. And in time, you know, well, like if you look at Star Trek, right? You know, the little flip phones they had in Star Trek back in the 1960s. Well, we've gone beyond that now. You know, there's so many creative things that are done within the realm of science fiction. You know.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's cool reading this chapter because it makes you realize that it's something you can actively develop, you know. I think we all do it kind of haphazardly every now and then, but when you think of it as an actual muscle that you can build.
Yeah, mindfulness, yes. Being mindful, right, of tapping in, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And giving yourself that space. Go on, Geraldine.
Yeah. I was struck by it kind of came back again to believing in yourself, you know, that whole thing of your knowing, so that when you get a hunch that you actually sort of trusted enough to go with it.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the whole same line as, you know, persistence and stuff. Like, I realized for me, it's like persistence is believing in you, and then in every moment choosing to sort of stay loyal to that belief in yourself, you know. And I kind of, in this, I think, where it's sort of choosing to really trust yourself, and when you get a hunch to trust it and not be outside.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really important point, Geraldine, because I think if you don't believe in yourself, or your belief dips, it feels like to be persistent, or to do the things you know you need to do, it can feel like you're pushing a rock up a hill because there's something missing. I can so relate to that. And so, yeah, like you said, you have to sort of just keep it in your mind that what you know, that the part of you that does believe in yourself, and just do whatever you can to make it flourish. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you both for coming out.
Yeah. Well, it was nice. I guess Tracy's on the road today.
Yeah. Yeah. Him and his girlfriend are driving very close to where I live to go to Italy, so they're actually just going to miss the hangout, but I better get off because they're going to be arriving soon.
Yeah. Okay. Well, say hi to Tracy for us.
I will.
Okay, and have a great day, Geraldine, and you too, Sandy.
Thanks, Gail and Geraldine, and let's enjoy cultivating our genii.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.